Welcome to the Robcast. This is a show about Oakville, the people that live, work, and do business here. We're honored to have our guest here. This is the Chief of the Halton Regional Police Service and longest acting police chief in Canada, Stephen Tanner.
It's the Robcast Podcast. He's with you for the next hour or 20 minutes. Who knows? Let's see how it goes.
The Robcast is brought to you by Oakville's own Fisher Private Wealth Management of RBC Dominion Securities and Angus Fraser Private Banker with RBC Private Banking Oakville. And Agency One, Oakville's marketing powerhouse. Take your business to the next level with ease.
Here he is. It's Rob Raham.
Chief Tanner. Is that what I should be calling you or addressing you as?
Yeah, let's go with Steve.
Steve.
I've been Steve all my life. So
you were mentioning something about the polygraph just before we get on here. Like, what, is that one of the first questions that you check with people?
You know what, polygraphs? We could do one right now. We could do one online sometime, right? But
he knows.
It was probably about 2.5 years. Most interesting parts of policing career for sure.
Is that right?
Incredible cases and things. Yeah.
Yeah, you've had a long career, and we're going to get touching on a lot of it. I want you're born and raised in Oakville. Just share with us kind of your life growing up in Oakville was a lot different. You know, we're not going to kind of age you here, but it was a lot different than it is now.
Yeah.
And what led to you kind of deciding to become a police officer?
Yeah, it wasn't something I planned to do. I grew up in Oakville. I went to a high school called Purdue, which St. Purdue I call it now because it was sold to the Catholic School Board and is now St. Thomas Aquinas. And,
right.
It was great growing up in Oakville, Riverside Drive. You know, it was in the 1960s and the 70s, so fathers worked and mom stayed home. And I always remember now, I just came from an equity, diversity, and inclusion event. And Purdue High School, 73 to 78, we were about 1,200 kids. Gary and Kathy were the two black kids in school.
Is that right?
And you think what they must have gone through at that time compared to what it is now. So, I mean, Oakville has changed so much over the years. And but I grew up in Oakville. I went to the University of Guelph originally to be a veterinarian.
Okay.
I used to work with. Now I say I've worked with animals for 42 years now. But it's that's that's what I went. That's what I went to University of Guelph for.
Sure.
And I played a little bit of football around Oakville and different things. And I was finishing school. Took a whole bunch of things at the University of Guelph and was looking at law school and medical school, and I got into law school at the University of Windsor, and I got hired here the next day. And I just sort of thought, I had enough of school at the time after 4 years, and let's try this police thing. And it just sort of took off from there. A great coach officer, and just loved every minute of it.
Is the process of, how much has the process of becoming a police officer changed since when you started, or is it still similar?
It always seemed long. There were tests. There were probably back then there were spelling tests. I don't think anyone needs to spell anymore with computers. But it's there were psychological tests and there was fitness tests and there were interviews but now it is a lot more behaviorally based oriented interviewing and things that our new recruits have to go through. So it is quite a process, and we have to be so careful on who we select. Yep. Once in a while, someone does not make it after they get hired. That's pretty rare. Our recruiters do a great job here, and we probably hire between 60 and 80 police officers every year, between adding to the service because of population growth and then also hiring for people that retire or resign and go to other careers.
Right. So it's 1982 was your first kind of year on duty, on patrol. How do you go from that to fast forward to being the police chief? Like, what's that process, or how do you get to that point?
Yeah, it was really different for me. It was I did a 3 years in uniform. I went into a detective office, went from there to a major crime office and polygraph in the homicide unit, and during the 16 years I was here, I probably had 8 different positions.
Okay.
Tons of training.
Is that normal, or did they see something in you? They thought, no, this.
Yeah, I think back then you would go into special units a little sooner than we do now. It's a little more specialized and a little more high on the training side of things.
Right.
But I was actually a sergeant here in polygraph, working in the homicide office in 1998. And this opportunity came up to be a deputy chief in Guelph, and I thought, well, why don't we try this sort of thing? And I applied. I just started to do my master's degree at the University of Western Ontario, and I applied and got this job. So I was 38, and I was leaving the police service, the only place I had ever worked, really, full-time. Walk out the door and start this whole different senior management career in 98 in Guelph. So it wasn't too long after that I switched over to Belleville. In 2000 and 2002 I became the chief, and I've been the chief there 6 years in Belleville, 4 years in Kingston, and now I've been back here 12 years since 2012. So it's back home, sort of a full circle. And
Right. So obviously, from the beginning of you becoming the chief of the Halton Police, there's been a lot of changes. What's one of the biggest changes you've seen here in Oakville during your kind of role as the police chief?
Yeah, it's a lot's changed in 42 years. A lot's changed in those 23 years of being a chief, and then 12 years back here. We're seeing a lot more real prevalence of firearms. A lot of that is street gangs from Toronto and Brampton and sometimes from Hamilton, but coming into Halton.
Right.
I would say we are kind of a target-rich environment for criminals, whether it's high-end vehicles and auto theft or robberies and jewelry store robberies. So we do have a lot more of some violent crimes that we would not have seen in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
But I always preface that by saying it's still a lot lower rates of those things happening here in Halton.
Yeah.
People think that there has been a lot of home invasions for vehicles over the last year or so. I think we've had a total of about 14 in Halton, which is 14 too many.
Yep.
But they probably had 100 in Peel. So relatively, we're fairly low. But if you're one of the families that have had that happen to, it's devastating, and you're never going to feel as safe in your home again. So we're taking all of those crimes extremely seriously.
Yeah.
Trying to arrest every person we can, and then hopefully our courts will do something and hold some people in custody once in a while.
Right. You kind of came out earlier this year in January with a strategic plan. Do you want to kind of outline? I mean, some of the flyers have been going out recently to people's homes with a strategic plan, and I think some of it is over the next 3 years is reducing auto theft by 50% or something to that effect. Like, what are some of the things you're trying to tackle in that plan?
Yeah, there's some interesting things in there. I mean, it's a 4-year plan, and here in Halton, we started to do this before we were required to do it by the province.
Okay.
Now it's a good thing because the province, through the new Community Safety and Policing Act, requires all police services to do this.
Does it come with funding to help support that, or is that
the current provincial government does more to fund us for some serious crimes, guns and gangs and auto theft, than I've ever seen before. So we're thankful for that. We could always use more. But we are certainly targeting some different crimes during these next 4 years. Auto theft is one of them. I mean, we had 1,500 vehicles stolen last year.
crazy?
We're down about 10% year to date this year.
Okay.
In the last 2 months, we're down about 40%. I don't want to jinx us.
Yeah.
But really, a lot of the auto theft has been driven, I would say, by the federal government and CBSA in particular, not being able to tackle or to put the priority on our ports. So most of our vehicles that are being stolen here, Range Rovers, F-150s, Lexus 350s,
Yep.
SUVs, pickup trucks, are going into containers and they're going overseas on ships.
Yep.
We should be able to find a 10,000-pound vehicle that's being shipped out of the country illegally.
Yeah.
And they could put scanners in all of the ports. They're starting to do some of that.
Okay.
But there's still... CBSA concentrates on things coming into the country. They really only prioritize firearms and drugs going out of the country. And we don't export firearms.
Right.
85% of our handguns that are used in crime come here from the U.S. So
Sure.
they're coming in.
Yeah.
So the thing with auto theft is we should be able to reduce auto theft by more than 50% because this issue at the border needs to be dealt with. Some of the serious criminals need to be kept in jail. And that 50% should come about just because it's the right thing for different levels of government to do. There's also property crime in general. I mean, break and enters are always a concern to people. But there's a couple of interesting ones. Domestic violence, which we now call intimate partner violence. We have a full-time unit of 30 officers that do nothing but intimate partner violence. So that we have this specialist to deal with that. And human trafficking. We actually, ironically, sometimes would rather see those numbers go up because it would mean more people are reporting intimate partner violence, which is so underreported. And on the human trafficking side, it's sort of like drugs. You don't get a crime statistic really until you identify and rescue somebody from that human trafficking world.
Right.
So, we could put heads in the sand and say, we arrested 10 people for human trafficking, therefore it's not such a big issue. It is everywhere in Ontario, in Halton. everywhere, right along the 401, along the QEW corridor, all the different hotels. People are being victimized, and young women are being taken into that human trafficking, used to refer to as prostitution, but most often against their will, and sometimes not even knowing it.
Yeah. So obviously we kind of polled, through our website the people of Oakville, and had some questions and concerns to address with you. And well, obviously auto theft is one of the top ones. And so, and home invasion, or crime at the home level, of course. What are some things that people can do that you would recommend specifically to auto theft and deterring auto theft? It's one thing if the car gets stolen, you can get it back with a GPS tracker, great. But how do you deter it from even being stolen?
Yeah, there are some visual ways. One way for auto theft and home protection in general is lighting. So we can have our homes better lit. We can have motion sensors, so lights come on when criminals approach the house or come into our driveway. That may deter somebody.
Yep.
Honestly, a lot of our people, I know in Oakville, there's a lot of two-car garages that are full of stored items.
They got the old sofa in there, and they've got the $50,000 car on the driveway.
$130,000 car,
Right,
and the criminals are getting $100,000 profit when they get those overseas. So vehicles parked in a garage would be great. Yes, people can still break into a house and steal keys. That happens much less often, as do the home invasions. The club, the old-fashioned club, there are things you can put on tires as well. I have a club on my police vehicle that I put on every night. Even if it's parked in an underground, I'll put the club on just as a deterrent. That might only make the person go from your vehicle to a neighbor's vehicle.
Yeah.
If we all had a club, they can cut clubs off. We'll be honest about these things.
It's not the best option for them, right?
It's a deterrent. There are immobilizers in vehicles. The tag system is really effective.
Yep.
The Apple AirTags actually notify the criminal.
I have a friend who got his car back, and they were watching it with the police as it was driving through the north of Toronto, and they located it and got it back.
So some people, it's like having your home broken into. Some people are not as comfortable with their vehicle back after it's been stolen. We understand all that victimization sort of end of things too. But we need to deter these criminals as much as we can. We also have to, and our citizens as well, is lobby governments for some more serious
penalties or
results and penalties for these things. It's not just, I think, unfortunately, a lot of the courts have looked at auto theft as a property crime, and it's a lot more than that. It's a risk to the community. Every time a vehicle's stolen, they're ramming our police officers in their vehicles. They do not care what we do to stop them. They'll do anything to get away. They'll drive 200 kilometers an hour, put everyone else at risk.
Yep.
And so every time it's sort of a ticking time bomb, and more often there's firearms in the stolen vehicles when we do arrest people.
Yeah.
So it's an officer safety issue. It's a citizen safety issue. So it is a lot greater than just property crime.
There's obviously the vulnerability that people are starting to feel. And I think Oakville is kind of under a microscope in a way that it's this beautiful, safe place to live. That's what the slogan is basically in Oakville. And so, like you mentioned, the numbers aren't high, but at Oakville, that seems high. I've noticed driving around certain neighborhoods, there's a lot more kind of security signs, patrolled by. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the question is that another kind of direction that we're going at? Because I think some of the comments that were online were saying there's no kind of patrol by police in our streets. I've never seen a police officer in our street. And I don't know if that helps or not, just the presence. Is that something that you guys consider or look at?
Yeah. I mean, presence is definitely a deterrent. People could wait until a police car goes by and the car might not be back for a half an hour or for the rest of that shift. So, I mean, general deterrent, certainly. People know that there are enough officers out there that they might get caught as a deterrent. If they see a police vehicle, they might not do anything that night. They might come back the next night. So we really have to take a bigger overall look at this issue and try to make as many deterrents as we can. Our officers they're doing everything they can do. We recover about 60% of our stolen vehicles in Halton. And we make as many arrests as we possibly can. So, but the deterrent side of it is becoming increasingly important. Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that the people who are kind of running these car theft, that they're getting younger people to do it because the charges are less on them, and it's more of a slap on the wrist, as some people would say, and they're back out doing it a week later.
Absolutely. We've had people arrested for auto theft and out the next day.
Yep.
And then we had one, I know of one for sure, who was arrested 3 times.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Stolen vehicles. So, it's hard to stop somebody.
Is that a federal, like a provincial level where they have to make the change to the laws?
I mean, the courts are part of it. Our jails, we do not normally have a lot of jails in Canada. So the ones that we do have, Maplehurst is a very large one in Milton.
Yep.
That's sort of a regional, provincial correctional center. So people that are charged and awaiting court or serving sentences less than 2 years are in Milton. But they are very full too. Yep. So we're going to have a capacity issue unless we prioritize some of these dangerous offenders being in jail. Maybe there's other ways we can deal with the people that are committing frauds and things. And I'm not a big fan of ankle bracelets. I've seen people take them off and do whatever they want. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of repercussions. So
right.
the deterrent end is definitely where we need to go.
I think obviously it's in some of the mandates that have been spoken both provincially and federally is more police officers on the streets, and so recruitment and how do people that are coming out of university like yourself didn't know where the direction. What's the best way to kind of go down that road, and what's the process of applying?
Yeah, there are some people who have always thought they want to be a police officer, or they think that sooner, so they may go the community college route.
Okay.
Sheridan College, Mohawk, Humber, they all have pretty good 2-year. Usually police-related programs. University is also a great way to go. And I've always said it really doesn't matter what you study. You can study criminal justice or criminology, and it's helpful, but you could really take anything because you're learning how to learn and get some life experience. And then if your interest is in policing or you want to explore it, certainly our recruiters will help you out. Everything is available online on our websites. You can go on there. It'll have details about, there's a provincial test that people do to get a certificate. And then after that, they can apply to any police service in Ontario. So that's sort of the ground in. Education is important. Mm-hmm. Fitness is important. It's not everything, but it certainly is a part of what you need in policing from a front line, even just to protect yourself and to protect others. So we will probably be hiring about 70 or 80 police officers every year for the next 5 to 10 years. Between the fact we have to grow to match some of our population growth, and we need to retire or hire when people do retire or resign from the service. So there are lots of vacancies. And also on the civilian side, I mean, there's communication dispatcher positions, records, forensic people, special constables who deal with prisoners. So we have about 350 civilian positions that people could explore as well.
Yep.
And it really is an opportunity to have a career that's interesting, generally different every day. You never know what each day is going to bring, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Often on the civilian side as well. So it really is a different career. I can't imagine ever having done anything else now looking back. But I would encourage anyone that's interested, please look us up online, look up policing as a career. You're needed all across this province and country, so come and join us. You'll have a. You made
me think of something here. Is in your early days on patrol, what was the craziest call that you went on? Is there something in your career that stands out and goes, oh man? It doesn't have to be serious or rough. Maybe just funny. I don't know. Is there something that's a call that stood out to you?
There are certainly some funny things. I don't know if we could talk about them here, but. Yeah, I mean, there's the serious ones. I was on our tactical rescue unit for a few years, so we're certainly we're involved in the arrest of homicide suspects and
and break the door down kind of situations.
Yeah, some of them are break the door down, tear gas sorts of situations. Wow. They happen everywhere in Halton as well. But those officers, our tactical team now, are so highly trained and so well equipped. I mean, I can count on them to do anything that we need to do to take the most dangerous of offenders into custody. So, yeah, there are a lot of funny things that happen, a lot of funny people that you work with or you meet, and it's all part of the adventure. Was there
a situation when you finally became a police officer and you thought, I'm going to get that bully, I'm going to go see that guy that made my life tough in high school?
Yeah, I thought about it a couple times, but
I've check the name every now and then.
I've always stayed away from it. We drifted apart. I don't even know where they are, and we have some pretty strict rules about even checking that sort of
course.
stuff, as much as I'd like to sometimes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other bullies that we've been able to arrest that for other people. So maybe we live that vicariously.
If you were to kind of step back and look back at your career right now, is there something you're most proud of that you would kind of say that, you know, the impact you had in somewhere?
Yeah, you know what? There's cases that stand out, like the Shafia homicides in Kingston, where 4 people were, I mean, they called it honor killing, but there's no such thing as honor killing. As a case was incredible.
Yeah.
But I think probably one of the things I'm most proud of is back here and our commitment to our own officers and to our citizens. But from a wellness perspective, we've developed quite a highly evolved organizational wellness unit. It's off-site, it's private, it's confidential. Our officers feel safer to go there. We have great benefits, especially on the psychological side for officers and frontline members.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think when it's all over and we know of people, our own members, who that has helped or saved, that's probably one of the biggest things.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, you know, with the home invasion stuff, and I know it's people are starting, because of social media, you see it,
Yeah.
especially in Oakville. It gets shared. There was one just in Joshua Creek, I think, a week ago. And these are armed men breaking into a house. Kids are sleeping.
Yeah.
You know, what do you do in that situation as a homeowner? I mean, I grew up with a father with a machete under the bed, and I always
Yeah.
asked him why, and he said, "Well, just so the visual that the people knew they broke into the wrong house." So, are you just supposed to let them do it? And you're like, can you defend yourself when someone comes in your home?
You know what? You can defend yourself, and technically there is a right to defend yourself. It's not to the same extent that we hear about in the United States.
Sure.
It's pretty much the further extreme in the U.S. at times.
Yeah. But they're waiting for it usually.
I would certainly expect people to defend themselves if they can, but we also say don't take a knife to a gunfight. And if people are breaking into the house and they're armed, or they may be armed, there's only split seconds.
Yeah.
Most people will, you know, give them the car keys. I'm not saying, as someone in Toronto said recently, just do that, because there are ways that, you know, we can prevent different things and target hardening of our homes and things like that. But you also don't want to risk, you know, further injury to yourself or your family.
Yeah.
So it's a really fine line. You may be criminally okay to defend yourself, and you should be, but it also may come with an increased risk that's not worth it.
We had another member of the Oakville Talk kind of ask about the panhandlers in Oakville, and you know, it seems like every off ramp now, every day there's someone kind of there, and how do we kind of manage that? And are they actually poor? Do they need it, or is it a deeper thing than that?
Yeah, it's a deeper thing. I mean, there are some that are legitimately poor and are doing that on their own. We don't tend to see that a lot in downtown Oakville or Burlington, Milton, or Halton Hills, like we do in Toronto on
Sure.
Yonge Street and things. But there are individuals who are dropped off here by, I would call them organized crime people, because it's crime that is organized, not necessarily mafia. But there are, people are dropped off at ramps because they're close to the highways. So I do know that there are groups that come from Toronto or north of Toronto and drop off 10 or 12 people at intersections on highways just to collect money all day and then get picked up and driven back to a very expensive home in the evening. So,
Wow.
yes, it is nice to help people if they need to be helped, but not every person asking for help with a sign is necessarily doing it for themselves or their own kids.
Yeah.
There are people that are profiting from this thing as well. I fell for it once myself, I know. I was at Guelph Line and the QEW, and a couple of days later I was speaking to our investigators, and they said, oh yeah, we followed one of these vans back, and the people were at that intersection, and I just felt like I had been robbed in some ways. I wanted to help, but that money, in that case, I think went somewhere else. So just be cognizant of it. And you know, sometimes even if people are around the Tim Hortons or something and asking for something, if they're really hungry, buy the coffee or something to eat.
Yeah.
The money might be going to something else.
We do see, I mean, I've seen driving over Trafalgar that, you know, the police do come up up to the op ramp and are speaking to the person, what do they do at that point? Do they just make them go away? I mean, you've heard, we put them on the train and send them to Hamilton. Is that true? Or?
No. The one thing with the GO train is the GO train, Metrolinx provides free transportation to people who do not have money. So we have had situations where homeless individuals do access the GO trains. So they do end up along the GO train tracks here. And we did have a number of people who were overnight staying in our Burlington GO stations more often because they were unlocked, heated,
right.
And you can charge iPhones and different things. I sometimes wonder how everyone has an iPhone, but there's electricity, there's heat. So they have started to close those, I believe. And we do have some very small areas where people are staying in tents, and we do have people that are homeless and people that are suffering that way or have lost homes. But a lot of times when our officers interact with those people at the highway intersections, it's to determine, are they really there legitimately? Have they been dropped off? Have they been dropped off against their will? That's a different type of human trafficking. Also to assess maybe their mental stability, whether they're a harm to themselves or, in the furthest extreme to someone else. Usually not. But then our officers get called because people are concerned, so we check in on the wellness of those individuals as well.
Yeah. Well, another main question that some parents have had is this kind of this new rise in fentanyl, and it's starting to have presence in Halton. So where are we at with that situation?
Well, it's every time you think that the worst drug has been invented, something else comes along, and fentanyl is certainly, crushed cocaine or crack cocaine from an overdose and a death perspective across Canada. Thousands of people have died from fentanyl overdoses, and they're not all intentionally using fentanyl because the drug dealers will mix fentanyl in with cocaine or other drugs. So it doesn't matter how old you are, if it's one of our kids or it's one of our brothers or sisters or parents, if they're taking a drug and they're not sure what's in it, that can be fatal. We have people who have almost purposely overdosed on fentanyl knowing that there's someone there with naloxone to bring them back. That's like one of the scariest things I've ever heard of. But, we encourage people who are at risk for drug use to have somebody close by with naloxone. Every one of our officers has naloxone.
Okay.
I have it in my vehicle. It's given out free at drugstores to people. And recently, we started when we were releasing prisoners that have been with us overnight and they're being released in the morning to go to court later or when they've sobered up or whatever. If they are at risk, we will offer them naloxone kits as well to take with them.
Yeah.
That's something I never would have thought police services would have done back in the 80s or 90s.
Certainly not. Another question for you, Chief Tanner, from someone out there. We're seeing these trends online on Instagram and TikTok where, civilians are going up to police and kind of borderline harassing them. Give me your badge number, your name. Do they have a right to do that, and how does the police officer kind of have what can they do to respond to that?
Yeah, it really puts officers in a difficult position. I wish people had better things to do with their time. I don't have time to do that to anybody, police officers or otherwise. But we've had people come to our police stations, to our headquarters, walk around the buildings with video cameras. It causes security concerns when it comes to even individuals' license plates and different things, but they're purposely trying to egg somebody on, instigate something and some kind of a response. It's been interesting a couple times where the officers just responded perfectly and talked to the person and said, go ahead, you just can't go in there. One actually went into our Milton,
coming into the police
our Milton police station and filmed the civilian person that was sitting at the front desk. It was just a good interaction, and the person left, in fairness, and then on video said, well, Bob and the front desk person was really polite and he acted professionally. Let's see if we can find someone else that doesn't. So
wow.
Why people do that is beyond me, and it does put the officers in a tough position sometimes, because if someone's not doing something illegal, there's not much we can do about it. And I've always said to our officers now, we have a lot of cameras in our vehicles and different things, some body-worn cameras. It's not a real issue here for every officer to have their own body-worn cameras, but just assume you're on video all the time and act accordingly. If there is a camera, play up to it. honestly, be as nice as you want to be, but maybe even a little extra nice, and just let the video speak for itself.
Yeah. I mean, do they have a right to ask that information? Like, can they say, is there some unwritten rule that I'm not aware, or a rule that I'm not aware of, that a police officer has to give their badge number and name to anyone who asks for it?
There isn't really, there's no law that says people have to.
Or is it just like you're saying, I have nothing to hide, so here's who I am?
I mean, we wear our name tags on our uniforms.
Yeah.
There are some, Toronto always used to have numbers on their epaulets.
I remember that,
would be the number that somebody could take down. We do identify ourselves. There's no reason not to. But sometimes there's a legitimate, safety concern, depending who the officer's dealing with, if the individuals know who they are. So it's a bit of a fine line.
Yeah. Last question, that we got kind of from the people of Oakville was, concerns of speed or kind of road rage or blowing through stop signs and things like that. Personally, I don't see it as much. I don't see it as people speed, people that are bad drivers. There's no doubt about that. And you kind of launched a new program in the school zone. So are you getting a lot of calls from the public about, excessive driving or speed? Or do you get those calls?
We do. I mean, we get calls directly from citizens who observe things, whether it's distracted driving or running red lights. I see people run red lights. I stop them still once in a while, especially when it's transport trucks, which scare me running through red lights.
Yeah.
But the distracted driving, the aggressive driving, it certainly is out there. And traffic is not like it used to be in the 80s or 90s either. Like it's you cannot count on getting from Oakville to Burlington in 10 minutes anymore. So
on any given day, at any given time.
So if it's a problem, when I was taking my kids to hockey or whatever in different towns, leave a little bit early if you can, because if everyone's rushing, it's just adding to the problem. But then a lot of our politicians and our municipal councillors get calls from people, so then they pass on the concerns. There are stop signs in Oakville. There's one in the Bronte area where most people think it's a yield sign, I'm sure.
I think I know the one you're talking about.
It's a three-way stop, and it's not too many people stop there. We could put somebody there and charge people all day. So we try to warn people. We try to educate people. We try to target the intersections where there are more accidents, because that might prevent more accidents. But driving is definitely a concern, and there are some people driving on the roads that should not be driving.
Certainly. Was there something that was happening in the school zones? Because this is a big project. I think there's over 15, 17 cameras that can be put in different school zones or just certain locations in Oakville.
Right.
Was this derived from complaints, or was there accidents at these scenes, or is it? I'm just trying to find why we're spending the money on that specifically.
You know why it's happened, and I've said probably the last 3 or 4 times we've done our police budget at regional council, I've had people ask me about photo radar.
Yep.
So many years ago, the province tried photo radar. It became a bit of a political thing, and they got away from it because people thought it was just a tax grab. Actually, it ticketed people that were speeding is what it did. It made me slow down as a driver. I think that was in the 80s or 90s. Yep. Now what the province did is said they gave the municipalities the authority to put photo radar in safety zones and school zones, ran and operated by the municipalities. So they are an investment. They will pay money back to the municipalities.
Sure.
The other thing it does, quite frankly, is it will capture more people speeding in those areas without us having to have police officers there. Once people are aware that those cameras are there and people are getting tickets, they should slow down. And if we have officers there, then we pull the person over. Somebody is upset or pissed off at the police officer for giving them a ticket.
Yeah, they're late for something.
So it's sort of like the red light camera tickets. We have them in Oakville as well.
Yeah.
They are positive because it prevents our officers from having to have that negative interaction. We will have it when we see that type of stuff. But this is using technology to increase safety, do some enforcement. People don't get points on their license because it does not identify the driver. So, there are some people who could speed every day if it was photo radar and have enough money they don't care about the tickets because they don't get the points.
Right.
That's a bit of a downside maybe, but at the end of the day, it is a technological way to enforce highway traffic and safety.
Yep.
So I encourage all of our municipalities to do it.
Well, Chief Tanner, this brings us to the section of our show called the Rob Robcast Rapid Ask. So first question, I think this is kind of a unique one for you. You're on death row, and you have your last meal. What's on that plate? After being police chief for X amount of years, now you're on death row. So what's the last meal on the...
Definitely 16-ounce prime rib.
Oh, yeah. Anything on the side? Just straight prime rib?
Probably baked potato and a really good glass of red wine.
Nice. Let me ask you, what's something that most people may not know about you?
I played a little bit of sports. Played for the Oakville Longhorns, which was an old football team here.
Yeah.
They actually used to be a good football team.
They did.
Back in the day. And
Were they up at Ninth Line? Is that where they trained?
We used to play at Bronny Athletic Field.
Okay.
And they've now moved to Mississauga, I think. But, that whole sports thing, I grew up playing hockey and in Oakville. I think everybody did that. Relatively.
Yeah.
And sports is such a big part of life. And I think that sort of whole teamwork and working with people and common goals is something that's important to policing. We look for that sort of background. But sports has always been important for me.
If there's someone out there in the world, that famous or not, dead or alive, that you could sit down and pick their brain and have dinner with, who would that person be?
Oh, that is a good question. Everyone always talks about Gandhi and different people. I'd actually like to sit down with Barack Obama.
Okay.
I don't know if I want to talk to him before or after this next election, but he's regardless of the politics and conservative, liberal, and all that sort of stuff. I think he was really an inspirational person and just a fantastic speaker.
Yeah, you're going to get back into your car here. You had a great show. What music are you putting in there?
Country music will be 94.7 from Hamilton. Todd and Melissa will be off the air by now, but generally country. But I grew up, I actually played in a jazz band and different things
musician.
Through high school and stuff too. So I listen to all kinds of music. Rock's great, but probably country's the go-to.
No. Well, listen, Chief Tanner, we really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show, and please stay tuned for another episode of the Robcast.
The Robcast is brought to you by Oakville's own Fisher Private Wealth Management of RBC Dominion Securities and Fraser Associates of RBC Private Banking. And Agency One, Oakville's marketing powerhouse. Take your business to the next level with ease.